This is a live look inside the public memorial service that is set to start in just about 4 minutes at the Basilica at St. Vincent College in Arnold Palmer's hometown of Latrobe. So many gathering to remember Palmer, who died last Sunday at the age of 87. We'll have full coverage of the memorial service the moment it begins on air here and also instantly on the WTAE mobile app. And the memorial service for Mr. Palmer as we continue to honor his life and legacy. So many people are now sharing their stories about what he meant to them over the years. Let's go back outside St. Vincent College where we find Pittsburgh's Action News 4 anchor Ryan Recker. Ryan.
Janelle, good morning to you once again. The folks here at St. Vincent tell me that over 5,000 folks from the general public have come here to St. Vincent College today. They will be able to watch the memorial service both at the Student Center and on video screens at nearby Chuck Knoll Field. An estimated 2,000 more will be inside the Basilica, family and friends of Arnold Palmer. And we've seen so many big names come through today. Just a few moments ago, Phil Mickelson and his wife Amy arrived. We mentioned earlier Ricky Fowler and Bubba Watson, who recently helped the United States win the Ryder Cup. They had the Ryder Cup here as Arnold Palmer was on their minds over the weekend. And shortly here, during this 90-minute program in celebration today, we are going to hear so many memories and stories of a man whose life story deserves to be so richly remembered. So often in sports and entertainment, we hear the term legend used. At times, it's overused. Saying Arnold Palmer is a legend, well, that is clearly appropriate and automatic. But his legend is a unique one that is matched by very few. How many can say that in their sports they were transformative, transcendent, and trailblazing? How many have their own drink, their own logo, and their own army? Arnie was cool. He was charismatic. Someone you wanted to be. Someone you wanted to meet. And if you did, he had time for you, making his legions of fans feel important, bringing them, even if briefly, into his world. It was golf that made him famous and made us follow him. But golf only partly defines Arnold Palmer. A pitchman, a philanthropist, a pilot. Arnold Palmer was in every way the king, but in so many ways he was and wanted to be just one of us. And you can hear the bells behind us here outside of the Basilica at St. Vincent College as I'm once again joined by Pittsburgh's Action Sports Guy Junker. And one of the speakers today will be the great Jack Nicklaus, as golf's greatest champion will remember and memorialize one of golf's most important people of all time.
Yeah, I called him my competitor, my friend. And I think that's the way to describe them. They continue to compete long after their best playing days were over in the business world and with golf equipment and such. Annika Sorenstam is going to speak, former LPGA star. Tim Finchem, who's the commissioner of the PGA Tour. Vince Gill, country music star, will be playing music. And I'm interested to hear from Sam Saunders, Arnie's grandson, is going to speak too at the service, which we'll have for you in the next hour.
If you think back to the years with Jack Nicklaus, they go back 6 decades, and it really began with some friction. It was a rivalry. It was frosty in the beginning, and most notably that 1962 U.S. Open at Oakmont, and that's one thing Arnie looked back on. He always wanted to win at Oakmont, win an Open there, and it never happened. And that was setting up to be yet another coronation for him. Here comes a young Jack Nicklaus in 62, and he wins at Oakmont.
Well, a lot of the friction with Jack Nicklaus and other golfers early on was over Arnie's army, and especially when it was at Oakmont. I mean, these people, imagine like the Heinz Field emptying out and all those people, following him around. But as I talked to Nick Faldo earlier this morning, they have grown to appreciate what Arnie did for golf because they all made a lot more money because of that.
He had so much influence over so many. The game, what athletes were able to do with their own names and brands beyond their respective sports. Arnold Palmer, touching so many, and so many that he touched are here today at St. Vincent College as once again we are inside taking a look at the Basilica, where thousands of friends and family have come here for this memorial today. Thousands more, as I talked about, are here on the St. Vincent campus. And Guy, what is just a beautiful fall morning here in Latrobe.
As we drove up and it was still dark, there was so much fog, I was worried because the airport, which bears his name right over the mountains behind our cameraman, Eddie Cunningham here, I thought if the airport's fogged in, a lot of these people were flying into Arnold Palmer Airport this morning. Luckily, that lifted, and it seems like everyone that was supposed to be here was able to make it.
And part of Arnie's charm, I think, over the years is the fact that he never lost that connection with Latrobe. Still made his home here, was obviously incredibly approachable, and seemingly when he wasn't at his other home in Florida, he was here.
You know how regional we all are. When he was still playing, even when he was playing as a senior, and they would just announce, from Latrobe, Pennsylvania, when he would tee off, and the people Latrobe claim him, but we claim him from Pittsburgh too.
Fascinating when you think about the connections here at St. Vincent College. You mentioned it earlier. You have Arnold Palmer, Latrobe High School nearby. 1 year ahead of him, Fred Rogers in his graduating class. The Steelers, of course. This has been their home for 50-plus years. So much history here today. And when you think about historical sports figures in terms of what they meant to their sport, the influence that they had, their trailblazing abilities, Arnold Palmer is up there with anybody. And I say that because if you think about when his prime ended, essentially in the early to mid 1970s, how many athletes can you say extended for the next 4 decades their careers in terms of being in the public consciousness, to having influence, to affecting lives? You think about Tiger Woods and where he was in his career not long ago. You would not think that someone of that stature would need to turn to anybody, but he said Arnie was his man when he needed to turn to someone for advice. That does it for us. We will now turn it over to the service, which is beginning inside of the Basilica here at St. Vincent College.
Good morning, and please be seated. It is a privilege for me, as Archbishop of St. Vincent, to welcome all of you to this memorial service in tribute to Arnold Palmer. On behalf of all of us, I offer my heartfelt condolences and promise of prayers to Kit, to Amy, to Peggy, to Arnie's sisters Lois, Jean, and Sandy, to his brother Jerry, to his grandchildren and family, to Arnie's Army, and to all of you who were so very close to this good man in any way. We also remember on this special day Winnie Palmer. I hope our presence with you this morning will lighten your sadness and magnify your gratitude to God for the gift of Arnie's presence in your lives. In planning the memorial service, we had no certain idea of how many would come, but certain, however, that the Basilica was not large enough to accommodate everyone. Sam Saunders, the grandson of Arnold Palmer, said, "Don't turn away anyone." My grandfather wouldn't want anyone to be turned away. So we were determined to find a good place for everyone, confident that the presence of the human spirit is not bounded by the walls of a particular place. I would like to begin our memorial service with a reading of Psalm 23. This psalm of trust in God and human courage was meaningful to Arnie throughout his life. You, Lord, are my shepherd. I will never be in need. You let me rest in fields of green grass. You lead me to streams of peaceful water, and you refresh my life. You are true to your name, and you lead me along the right paths. I may walk through valleys as dark as death, but I won't be afraid. You are with me, and your shepherd's rod makes me feel safe. You treat me to a feast while my enemies watch. You honor me as your guest, and you fill my cup until it overflows. Your kindness and love will always be with me each day of my life, and I will live forever in your house, O Lord. Let's pause for a moment now of silent reflection in memory of Arnie Palmer. Our celebration today is a celebration of Arnold Palmer's life, a tribute to a life well lived, a life well played. Charlie Mechem, Arnie's lifelong friend, will introduce those paying tribute to our dear friend and neighbor, Arnold Palmer.
That's the best we can do. Good morning to you all. As I look over this crowded church, I have to say this is exemplified by the familiar image of him striding up the fairway with that iconic smile, hitching up his pants and giving it a thumbs up. That's what I want you to think about all day today. I want you to smile, because he smiled about 95% of the time. When he missed a putt, maybe, but whatever. Got to be happy. You know, as I was leaving the motel this morning, somebody said, "I'm eager to hear you speak." And I said, "Well, you know, I can hardly wait to hear what I have to say." So, you know, bear with me. But we have a very distinguished list of speakers. Distinguished speakers. And indeed, when I looked at the list, I was the only name on it that I'd never heard of before. But I'll give it my best shot. After I retired from the LPGA, Arnold invited me to become a consultant and advisor to him and move into his office at Bay Hill. I was honored to do this, and we, for the next 10 years, shared desks about 8 feet apart with an open door in between. So naturally, we had a lot of conversations. So what I want to do today as my part of the program is simply to share a few just simple stories that I hope and think might give us a smile. He used to say to me, "I'm not very smart." I'll bet you've all heard that from him. "I'm not very smart." And I would always say something like, "Oh, for God's sake, Arnold, give me a break. Maybe you can con some people with that line, but you're not conning me." And to use the golf phrase, he was sneaky smart. He also was very wise. I mean, very wise. And wise is in short supply. I don't think anything important happened in the golf world that wasn't run by Arnold at one point or another. Not just because they wanted his approval, but because they wanted his thoughts, his ideas. This was one smart dude. He'd also ask me, not infrequently, "Am I going broke? Do I have enough money?" And I'd always say something like, don't be ridiculous. But then I decided one day I was going to play the game too. And he said, "You sure I got enough money?" "Well, Arnold, I really need to level with you. You probably are getting low. You probably have enough for maybe 3-4 weeks." And he looked up at me with that funny, crooked smile, and we both laughed and winked. There's a great restaurant in La Quinta that bears his name. He loved it and ate there virtually every night that he was in the desert. It's amazing. People come into the restaurant virtually every day, and have now for years, and say to the manager, "Where does Arnold sit when he comes in? What does he eat when he's here?" So I said to him one day, what should we tell them when they ask what you eat? And he said, well, you know what I like. What should we tell them? I said, let's tell them that he always orders the most expensive thing on the menu. He said, I like that. Let's tell him that. As we both grew older, my hair would get a little longer and his a little thinner. And he would say to me, Charlie, you need a haircut. And my answer was, Arnold, that comment is coming from the deep envy and jealousy that you feel for my hair. And by the way, have you ever considered a toupee? He reached for a 3-iron and I moved out quickly. September the 10th of 2009 was a memorable day. It was AP's 80th birthday. Naturally, a lot of parties, events were planned. The evening of the first day was hosted by PNC Bank in Pittsburgh, and the function was held in the Hall of Fame room at PNC Park, home of the Pirates. It was really a delightful affair. The highlight of the evening, at least for me, was an interview of Arnold by Jim Nantz, whom you will hear from a bit later here today. They sat on a slightly raised stage with 2 armchairs and a small table between them. When Arnold was called up, he wasn't quite prepared to be called up, so it would be a little later, but he jumped up and went up to the stage. Well, everyone knows that Arnold enjoyed a little Kettle One on the rocks with a slice of lemon, but apparently in his haste to get to the stage, he left his drink at his table. Well, Jim had been interviewing him for 20, 30 minutes, and he said, King, how you doing? Arnie looked at the table between them, contained 2 glasses of water, and he said, well, I'm okay, but I feel a little like I'm in the middle of the Sahara Desert. We all thought, what's that mean? And then we realized what it meant and took care of that as quickly as we could. One of my favorite stories, many of you have probably heard this, is the friend that told Arnold that his mother had been in a nursing home. Her memory was fading a bit. And one of his friends went to see her. She had been a great fan of Arnold's and had his picture on the wall surrounded by all of her family. Well, he had a nice visit with her, and he said as he was leaving, Mrs. Jones, it must be real comfort to you to have all those photos. And she said, oh, it's wonderful. She said, you know, I don't know who all those people are, but that's Arnold Palmer. This may be my favorite story. One day during the Masters telecast, we were having lunch. Arnie, of course, as you know, had won it 4 times, and I was curious to get his impressions of the course and the event. And as you know, holes 13 and 15 always present a very interesting challenge. They are both par 5s, have water hazards just in front, creek on 13, a lake on 15. More than once, players have laid up on these holes, being unwilling to risk going into the hazard and becoming toast. Well, I asked Arnold, have you ever considered laying up on 13 or 15? He sat for a minute, and then he said, you know how many times I've come in second at Augusta? And I thought, well, not really an answer, but I said, no, I don't. He said, neither do I. Think about that. Neither do I. And to me, that sort of said it all. Winning wasn't his only goal, but coming in second certainly didn't rank very high. So the memories that I have are all happy ones. And when I look over that wonderful photograph, you got to smile. And I would guess that your thoughts are the same. And that's exactly the way he would want it. And I hope you'll keep smiling. I'll be back a little later to close the program. Meanwhile, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the Commissioner of the PGA Tour, Tim Finchem, Arnold's dear friend. Tim?
So I got the same instructions, which were to make this an uplifting celebration, and I can tell you it's really, really hard to do that because we come here with heavy hearts, but also excited to be able to talk about what this man meant to all of us. I would like to share with you a private thought I had to try to get through this, which is I don't believe I saw the picture of the rainbow over the Basilica the other day, the day of the family service here, and then a few days before that, I had gone up. I told Holly I was going to go up and hit 18 balls in Arnold Palmer's name early in the morning, all by myself. I went up there. I wasn't paying a lot of attention. It was really early in the morning. I missed a couple of shots. I stood back. I said, do I really want to do this? And at that moment, there was a huge clap of thunder and a lightning bolt. And I looked up, and I hadn't paid attention. A huge dark cloud. And I looked at the cloud for a minute, and I said, Arnold, I don't know whether you're upset with how I'm trying to hit these shots, or there's no kettle in heaven. Either way, I can't help you out. But I don't believe, when we talk about Arnold's legacy, that it's a legacy in the past. I think it's a living legacy that will go forward. And I refuse to think that he has totally left us. I think his spirit is here with us. And if he's looking down at us today, and I'm sure he is, I hope he'll give me one of those little thumbs up, Charlie, for a decent job. I first met Arnold Palmer in 1957. I didn't really meet him. I saw him play in a golf tournament. But with Arnold, when you saw him play, it was the same thing as meeting him. Last year, when Johnny Harris decided to move his tournament to Wilmington, which is where I saw Arnold play, I called Arnold and I told him, you know, the tournament's going to come over to Wilmington, and I first saw you play there. And he said, you never told me that. And I said, what year was that? I said, 57. He said, yeah, I won that year. I came in second the next year. I wish I could have flipped him. Oh, his golf today. When he and the way he played the game came together with the golf course that Bobby Jones had designed with Alistair McKenzie without television in the forecast, and to create that golf course perfect for television and then be joined by CBS in 1960 set us on a whole different road. And Arnold took advantage of it. He revolutionized what was then known as sports marketing. He created what really was the essence of smart endorsement activity by an athlete. And in doing so, he began to change what historically had been professional golf. Professional golf in the days when the professional golfer couldn't come in the clubhouse to change their shoes in many instances. Arnold Palmer had a deep, deep love and affection for what it meant to be a professional golfer. Here was a man that was courted by kings, queens, generals, admirals from all over the world, presidents. He was a professional golfer, and he held his own with everybody, proud of the fact, and that pride resonated through everything he did. He unleashed in this country, starting in this country, an incredible growth in the game. When he started winning golf tournaments, there were 5 million golfers in the United States. When he stopped winning on the Champions Tour, there were nearly 30 million golfers. There were 5,000 golf courses. There were 15,000 when he finished winning. It was an incredible run for him and the players immediately behind him. The steps he took to change the landscape for professional golf, fundamentally change it, in teaming up with Jack Nicklaus to create what is today the PGA Tour. And having been with the PGA Tour now one way or the other for almost 30 years, it's always interesting to look at the work they did. I always refer to those two guys and the lawyers they found and the CEOs they brought to the table as the founding fathers of the PGA Tour, because very little has ever been necessary to change. The system that they put in place, a balance of outside, independent directors who had no financial interest in the sport, with players elected by their peers, has turned out to be a mechanism that has worked extremely well to grow that game for professional golfers. It's interesting to me also that the younger players coming up today understand what Arnold Palmer did. And they understand the system that they have benefited from, even as young players. Jay Monahan and I were having lunch at Bay Hill last spring. And in the lunchroom, player after player after player came up and paid their respects to Mr. Palmer. And they said it in lots of different ways. But I'll share with you a specific comment that Rory McIlroy made. He came over to Arnold, and in that period of time, Arnold was feeling the need to touch people. And he was grabbing each of these players and holding them as he talked to them. And he said to Rory, "Rory, I'm delighted you're here. If there's anything we can do for you, if there's anything I can do for you personally, you have my number, just call me this week." And Rory said, "Mr. Palmer, that won't be necessary. What you have already done for me is all that gives me all that I will ever need." He fully grasped the impact that Arnold had on the professional sport. Beyond his impact directly on the game, Arnold for years has been a philanthropist and a generator of great things for people. Starting with charitable giving. The support he's given to the hospitals in Orlando is phenomenal. When he went out and committed himself to be a partner in Pebble Beach with his friends Dick Ferris and Peter Ueberroth and Clint Eastwood, and they took that facility and that tournament and turned it into a charity machine. Over $100 million raised and given since Arnold became involved at Pebble Beach in the change of ownership out there. He hesitated on the first tee program because he wasn't sure it could work. When he found out it could work, he gave $1 million. He agreed to co-chair a fundraising campaign with George Bush that raised $110 million. His legacy in the area of giving will continue way beyond today and way beyond the future. But I think the puzzling thing for me is why? Why was he so popular? Was it because of the way he played the game? Was it the way he created excitement of watching golf on television? Was it just because the way he carried himself and he felt so strongly about how professional golfers should carry themselves? I think it was all of those things, but he had this other thing. He had this other thing. It was the incredible ability to make you feel good, not just about him, but about yourself. I always, when I was in public with Arnold, and I'll tell you one quick story, I was amazed by the reaction that people had to him on the streets, in cars, at tournaments or wherever, at Capitol Hill. And when you saw somebody react to him, he lit up like a Christmas tree. He took energy from that and then turned right around and gave it back. He and I were walking around St. Andrews the year of the 250th anniversary of the R&A, and we came over to the fence that the British Amateur was being played on the old course, and we came over to the fence. I had been taking pictures of he and various people who I'd never met for about 3 hours, video and pictures, and he just couldn't get enough of it. But he said, let's go over here and watch this final group come up. And we went over, and these two fellows were out on the green, and this one fellow had about a 12-foot putt, and Arnold were there on the fence. And he turned to me and he said, you think this fellow is feeling the pressure because you're watching him? So he could always put the needle in you in lots of different ways. You know, Charlie talked about Arnold giving you the thumbs up. I believe Arnold's watching us today. I think we should all lift our hand and give Arnold Palmer a thumbs up. Arnold, well done. Thank you.
I have to agree with Mr. Mechem this morning. I've thought a lot about what I was going to say here today, and let's see what happens. We are all here for the same reason. We loved Arnold Palmer. We all loved my grandfather. I had the unique opportunity to be able to call him a grandfather. My family here today had the pleasure to know him as not just the celebrity, the professional golfer, the aviation superstar. We knew him as Dumpy. That was his name. We referred him with as much love as we could. The name Dumpy came from my oldest sister, Emily, in an attempt to call him Grumpy as a little girl. Her GRs were Ds. And to this day, I have Dumpy in my phone. I'll never change it. My memories of him as a grandfather, our family's memories, are here in Latrobe, whether it was our summers here or the times we were here for Christmas. And it wasn't watching him win golf tournaments. It was watching him sled ride down the hills with us. It was seeing him swimming on his back in the pool outside of the house that my mom and her sister grew up in. Those are the memories that we got to see. But we all had the opportunity to see Arnold Palmer, the legend, the golfer, the style that he carried himself with. You all are used to seeing him in his stiff collared shirts with the umbrella pin, wearing it with a style that only he could. We had the unique opportunity to see him in cut-off sweatpants and a t-shirt sometimes. And we loved that man as much as you loved the man that you saw on TV. there wasn't a big difference between the man you saw on TV and the man that we knew at home. He was so special in that right. I want to tell you a couple of stories from me personally of why he meant so much to me. I could talk about my golf career and how he helped me get started in that and all of the great advice he's given me, but what he did so well with me is he was always there. He was there for me, but he was there for our entire family. He would always take my phone call, always. In fact, I called him one day, and he would always answer the phone, and in his voice, "Where are you?" That was how he answered the phone every time. And I was always at a tournament somewhere. I said, "Oh, I'm here, I'm here." Or he'd say, "Why aren't you playing?" And I said, "I am playing. I'm in Boise playing in the web.com event, or I'm, wherever." And this one particular time, he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm at home." And I said, "Where are you?" He said, "I'm with the president." So I said, "What do you, the president of what?" And he said to me, as if it was so obvious, "The United States." He said, "I'm in the Oval Office right now with the president." And I said, "Well, why are you answering your phone?" He said, "I wanted to talk to you." And that's what he did. He always wanted to talk to me. He always wanted to be there for us. And he always, always was. The next phone call I want to tell you about is a little bit tougher. It's the last phone call that I ever made to him. I will be grateful for the rest of my life that I called him at 4:10 on the Sunday that he passed away. I called him. He answered the phone on the first ring in the hospital, preparing for surgery the next morning. He asked me where I was. "Where are you?" I said, "I'm at home." I said, "I'm thinking about you today. We all are." And he told me to take care of my babies, take care of my children, take care of my family, my entire family. And I intend to do that and make him proud. And then I told him I loved him. He told me he loved me back. And that was the last thing we said to each other, and I will cherish that for the rest of my life. And at this point, I'm going to take one of the best pieces of advice he ever gave me. And that was to talk less and listen more. I'm proud to be here today. I'm humbled by each and every one of you here. My entire family is humbled to have you here today. And we thank you, and we will do our best to make him proud and make you all proud, to ensure that the name Arnold Palmer lives on forever and that Dumpy will always be with us. Thank you.
This man was my favorite person. Not my favorite golfer, but my favorite person that I ever met. troubled, and only you could know the pain. You weren't afraid to face the devil. You were no stranger to the rain. Go rest high on that mountain. The sun, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven a shouting love for the Father and the Son. Oh, how we cried the day you left us. We gathered round your grave to grieve. Wish I could see the angels' faces when they see your sweet, sweet swing. Go rest high on that mountain. The sun, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven a shouting love for the Father and the Son. Go to heaven a shouting love for the Father and the Son.
Wow. What a beautiful morning and what a magnificent venue to celebrate the rich and meaningful life of one of the best guys ever. It's a celebration that could not possibly be more special and important to everyone who loved Arnie, as all of us did. And I am deeply honored to be here this morning. Arnie and I met for the first time shortly after he won the 1961 Open at Royal Birkdale. I had joined a law firm in Cleveland that summer, and when Mark McCormick introduced me to Arnie, he mentioned to him that I had been a fighter pilot in the Marine Air Corps. Arnie had just begun flying, and our common interest in aviation was the beginning of a 55-year friendship that's one of the blessings of my lifetime. I did a fair amount of legal work for Arnie in those early days, so we spent a lot of time together. We traveled together. We watched our families grow up together. Over the years, we were partners at the AT&T. We were fellow trustees at Wake Forest, and we were involved very deeply in our respective careers. As you would expect, he could not possibly have been more supportive of mine. Helen and I went to Augusta to spend Masters Week with Arnie and Winnie every year for more than 30 years. We were around for victories, and we shared the defeats as well. In recent years, Arnie and I have probably spent hundreds of hours on the practice tee together, where we shared thoughts on just about everything except our golf swings. And as we celebrate so many amazing achievements in his life this morning, I'd like to share with you how important aviation was to Arnie. He didn't just like to fly. He loved to fly. And the faster the speed and the higher the altitude, the better he liked it. Shortly after he earned his private pilot's license, back in the late 50s, he put his golf clubs in the back seat of a Cessna 172, flew solo to Akron to play an exhibition, and was back home for dinner. That was it for Arnie. It was not only fun, but he recognized that flying his own aircraft would enable him to pursue both his golf and business careers and still live in Latrobe back in the days when there was no airline service. Arnie was not just a pilot, he was an outstanding pilot. In aviation, we describe the really special pilots as having good hands. And I can assure you that Arnie's hands were just as comfortable on the controls of an aircraft as the grip of a golf club. He logged almost 20,000 hours, and he flew just about everything: the 747, high-performance military jets, acrobatic aircraft, helicopters. If it had wings and an engine, Arnie would give it a try. He even flew with the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds. And long before they constructed that beautiful new runway at Arnold Palmer Airport, he operated his business jets in and out of a narrow 4,000-foot strip that had no control tower, minimal snow removal, no precision landing for Arnie to announce either his arrival or his departure with a low pass over the golf course. He might have taken a modest liberty with altitude and speed restrictions, but he never did so with a compromise of safety. But any of his fellow professionals who had the courage to accept a ride to the next tournament with Arnie learned very quickly the wisdom of tightening the seatbelt before takeoff. Arnie owned 7 different Citation business jets, and he earned his type rating just like every other commercial pilot by attending ground school and flying simulators to demonstrate his proficiency in handling emergencies. When Arnie climbed into the left seat of an aircraft, he was no longer a professional golfer. He was a very professional aviator. In 1975, he was asked to be a member of the crew of a record-breaking round-the-world flight in a Lear 36. Arnie was at the controls much of the time during that flight, and despite some last-minute rerouting because of a typhoon in Southeast Asia, they flew around the world in 55 hours, a record that still stands. And as I remember, 2 days later, he played in a PGA tournament and was hoping that someone might ask him if he'd taken any interesting trips recently. Arnie told me often that if he had not been successful in golf, he would have pursued a career in aviation. So if he hadn't won all those tournaments, I'm sure he would have done something extraordinary in aviation. Probably a fighter pilot, maybe even an astronaut. And who knows, he might very well have been inducted in the Aviation Hall of Fame rather than Golf's Hall of Fame. In 1996, Arnie and I flew his brand new Citation 10 nonstop from Latrobe to St. Andrews to attend a ceremony in his honor at the RNA. And although Arnie was proud to be named honorary captain during that trip, he was especially excited about flying over and back at close to the speed of sound. In 1999, we flew to the Paris Air Show, and it should be no surprise to anyone that he was just as excited and as much at home at an air show as he was at a golf show. His passion for aviation never changed. And by the way, he was not just a pilot and an aircraft owner. He was without question our strongest advocate and the very first person we called when we needed a credible, highly respected statesman to help address an important industry issue. When Arnie reached the age of 81 a few years ago, he decided it was time to move from the cockpit to the cabin. But typical of Arnie, he did it with a little flair. Jim Nantz had heard about this decision and made some comments on television about Arnie's distinguished flying career. So everyone knew that he would be making his final flight as pilot in command. He and Pete Lester, his longtime partner in the Citation 10, took off from Palm Desert on a bright Monday morning and headed for Orlando. As he always did, Arnie chatted with the air traffic controllers across the country, all of whom were familiar with his call sign of 1 Alpha Papa. And when he called in to report over El Paso, the controller said, "Good morning, Arnie. We're going to miss you. We've enjoyed having you in the system. And oh, by the way, you're cleared direct to Orlando, and you're number one to land." He landed in 3 hours and 17 minutes. For Arnie, just another speed record, but what a classy way to wrap up almost 60 years of flying. I'd like to close this morning with some personal comments about the best friend I ever had. For a guy who was so confident and so successful, it was interesting to me that Arnie occasionally needed a little reassurance. After an important speech or a business meeting, he would sometimes ask me, "Did I do okay?" And invariably, I'd pat him on the shoulder and I'd say, "You did okay." If Arnie were here this morning as we celebrate his life, and if he asked me, "Did I do okay?" I'd say, think about this. You raised a wonderful family that mirrors the strength of your character and the quality of your values. You have enriched and inspired the lives of millions of people all over the world, not just by how you played, but who you are. And your exceptional generosity to so many charities, especially for health care for babies and children, will have a positive impact and bring joy to thousands of families for generations. That legacy, in my view, is even more important than all those majors. So I'd have to say, my good pal, you did okay. Thank you.
Wow, this is powerful. I can't think of anything more powerful I've ever attended in my life. And I keep looking at that beautiful photograph over there. with Arnie smiling. Doesn't matter where you're sitting in the Basilica, he's smiling at you. And that's what you felt when you were in his gallery, as you cheered him on. Somehow he always connected with everyone. Charlie, I'm going to try to celebrate, take your cue. But I've been grieving for 9 days, like a lot of you have, since we got the news. And it's been hard. And there's millions of people feel that way. All of us had a connection. Most of us in this basilica had a friendship. But so many other people around the world never met him. But Arnie was their friend. Arnie through the eyes of the camera. I saw it in the program. Frank Chirkinian was the father of golf television, a mentor to many of us. He came along at the same time as Arnie. Together they created magic. Frank's in the World Golf Hall of Fame. He passed away in 2011. He was asked one time, "Tell me about Arnold Palmer." He said, "You know, the camera's a tricky thing. It either loves you or hates you. But it reveals everything." And the Golf Channel, and you made him proud. And you guys served our game with great distinction. I stand here realizing there's so many people who should have this chance to deliver a testimonial about the man. Whether it's a friend like Jim Rohr, who threw that magnificent party, Arnie at 80. Or his good friend R.J. Harper, who's out in Pebble Beach. Grew up wanting to be like Arnold Palmer. And the way he carries himself, he certainly has. But, you know, as a kid, you'd hear the stories that Arnold Palmer could relate to everyone, to the common man, but he rubbed shoulders with presidents and royalty alike. I actually, as bizarre as this sounds, I had a front row seat to see Arnold Palmer mingle with a president and royalty. It was May 7th, 2007. The occasion was a state dinner honoring Queen Elizabeth at the White House. I have no idea how I ended up on that guest list. But I was one of 135 squeezed into the state dining room. That is the number, by the way. If you're ever throwing a dinner there, that's the max. Her Majesty had not been honored in the United States since 1991. To show you the power of Arnold Palmer, there were 3 repeat attendees from the 1991 state dinner honoring the Queen to the 2007 dinner honoring the Queen. Those 3 were the Queen, Prince Philip, and Arnold Palmer. So, I headed to table 11 after getting my place card from a young Marine. And I was thrilled to see that I was sitting at the same table as Arnie, a good friend. It was comforting. There were 2 open seats across from us. There were bugles playing, and all of a sudden in came Prince Philip escorting Mrs. Bush. And then in came President Bush escorting the Queen to table 11. As the president walked by, he nudged me and said, "You're sitting here at Nantz for a reason. Keep the conversation going." Never been a problem for me. Try as I may, I peppered Her Majesty with 6 or 7 questions. And look, I get it. She had no idea who this guy was sitting across from her. I was getting one-word answers. And finally, she diverted the conversation and took control of things herself. She looked over at Arnie and said, "Mr. Palmer, I've always wanted to ask you, how many people in your lifetime have you played golf with?" Now, I thought of all the times that I've played with Arnold Palmer, and I've been fortunate to play from everywhere from Augusta to Pebble Beach to Latrobe and Laurel Valley and National Golf Links, and all these times more than I deserve, in many other social gatherings, just having dinner or corporate functions where we would do the Q&As that were brought up earlier. I never thought to ask him that question. And hats off to the Queen. That's a good question. I couldn't wait to find out the answer. I looked over at Arnold, and suddenly I realized, as Arnold looked up and saw 7 sets of eyes staring at him, he did not hear the question. As we all know, Arnie had the double-barrel hearing aids going, and I'm soon to join him. My hearing is shot as well. So I thought, I'm going to jump in here, and I leaned over and I said, "Arnie, Her Majesty would like to know how many people in your lifetime you've played golf with." Well, Arnold, sometimes would say a lot with just his hands. He wouldn't verbalize it. So I looked over at the Queen, and she's feeling a little uneasy because she's invested in this question and Arnie's not answering it. So she blurts out, 100,000 people. And I, just to be sure, I looked at Arnie and I said, 100,000 people. Everyone's eyes shot back to the Queen. Out of desperation, she throws out 500,000 people. 500,000 people. Arnie looks back at Her Majesty. There's a brief stare down, and then he shot that smile right there, and he went. So there was the answer. Arnold Palmer played golf with 500,000 people in his lifetime. A month later, I was with Arnie over at Oakmont, as we would do for years, working an event together for Rolex. And we both reflected back on that special night. And he said, "What did you think of that conversation with the Queen?" Which really wasn't a conversation, I reminded him. It was more, questions from the Queen and thumbs from Arnie. He said, "Does that sound about right? 500,000? And knowing him well enough, I could shoot straight with him. And I said, "The math doesn't add up. If you came out of the womb and day one, before they cut the umbilical cord, you're wearing your first diaper, got a little umbrella on it, out you go to the first tee and you play somehow with 3 people to complete your foursome, and you never played with those same 3 people again." Now, Arnie, I'm going to round off the numbers. That would be roughly 1,000 people a year. You would have to be 500 years old to have played with 500,000 people. Arnie said, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I'm going to have to live to 500. And I said to him, Arnie, you're going to live forever. Arnie's last tournament win on the PGA Tour was a 1973 Bob Hope Desert Classic. He was 43 and a half years old. He passed away last week, 43 and a half years after having won that tournament. It's almost eerie, if you looked it up, how the days almost match up in perfect symmetry. So the first 9 of his life, was spent right here in Latrobe, loving parents, big dreams, a father's dream passed on to a son, wants him to one day go down, compete at Augusta. People say, well, he won it 4 times. People forget, though, he was the first to ever win it 4 times. It was a huge achievement at the time, the first to ever win it 4 times. And all the other many things he did through those first 43 and a half years. But you know, the second 9, he was still competing. He was playing in the skins game competitions and playing some senior golf. But that second 9 was every bit as rewarding and fulfilling and relevant. You know, he was building golf courses all over the world. He was building hospitals. He was the captain of the philanthropic efforts of our sport. You know, unlike other sports, you never really shaken so many hands on the way to the practice putting green. I happened to be standing there, and as soon as we locked eyes, he said, have you made your decision? I was at a point making some significant career decisions at a crossroads where they're going to go over and maybe do news in the morning. And I told him, I'm staying with sports. This is my dream, was to grow up one day broadcast the Masters tournament. There's no way I'm ever going to walk away from that. He said it was a tough decision. I said it was. You see, at that time, my father was deep in the throes of Alzheimer's, a battle that he would lose soon after. And Arnie was aware of all that. And I told him it was the first time in my life I could never seek my father's counsel. He was incapable of being able to help me through a very important decision. And here he was, Arnold, about to go tee off for the last time. And he leaned over and he pointed right here with great force. He says, you don't understand. Your father helped you make that decision. You were listening to him. He was right here the whole time. With that, Roy Saunders was caddying for him. His son-in-law came over and he said, hey, bro, we got to go. And he said, I haven't hit a putt yet. Let me just drop these 3. He dropped 3 balls down, 12 feet away, all 3 center cut, bottom of the hole. And off he went to go play the Masters for one last time. And as he left, he looked at Roy, looked at me, and he said, you know, this was always my dream, was always to come here. My father's wish was passed on to me. I know it's time, but I never wanted it to end. We never wanted this to ever end, this friendship, this connection we had with Arnold Palmer. It's almost impossible to define how somebody that big could have so many friends. How did he manage that? It blows my mind how he was able to keep all of us somehow in the loop. What a special talent. What an enormous heart. Tim, you talked about him walking up the 18th. And also heard the comments about how he drew energy off of the feedback that he received. Did I do okay? Heard it a million times, Russ. It was beautiful. Later that day, in his last round, he came up the 18th. We looked out our perch. The ovation lasted for 18 minutes as he walked up. He was feeding off of it, and we said our goodbye. I'm going to do something a little unconventional here. We've had a thumbs up, but I think here we are in Latrobe, and knowing how much he loved that showering of love and appreciation. Can we give him one more? Can we give him one more walk and ovation for Arnold Palmer coming home up the 18th? Would you join me? We're going to miss him. The captain of our game. You're going to find him in a lot of places. He's going to spring to mind. And it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt that he's not going to be there to pick up that phone. It's going to hurt when he's not going to be there on the first tee when a springtime tradition rolls around. But I hope you'll always remember he's right here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I can't tell you just how honored I am to have been asked to speak here today. It's a very, very great privilege. But I must say that following Jim Nantz isn't my idea of a fair shake. The qualities of Arnold Palmer's character and his magnetic personality, which were so appealing in America, also endeared him to golf fans and sports fans, and indeed the wider public all around the world. Arnie's army was global, and affection for him, initially by Sam Snead and then by Jack Nicklaus. He won Canada Cups and World Cups in Ireland, in France, in Japan, in Mexico, as well as in Hawaii. He won the Australian and Canadian Opens, the Spanish Open, the Longcomb Trophy in Paris, and 2 World Match Play titles at Wentworth in England. He played on 6 winning Ryder Cup teams, and 3 of those matches were staged in the UK. I know that his success at the age of 45 in the PGA Championship particularly pleased him. At the prize giving, wearing his mischievous smile, he said he'd been trying for years to win a PGA Championship, and where better to do it than Royal St George's? No help to his major record. It was, in fact, the British version. After his playing years, Arnold's extensive business interests and his close association with Mark McCormack ensured that he retained his international focus. The growth of the Palmer brand is a story in its own right, but its foundations lie in the character and the values of the man himself. I think, though, it was Arnold's performances at the Open Championship which first really brought him to the attention of the overseas audience. In 1960, in its centenary year, the championship was to be staged at the old course at St Andrews, and there was a tremendous buzz of anticipation. Arnold Palmer was coming to play. That year, Arnold had already won the Masters and the US Open. Could he possibly make it 3 majors in a row? Well, it wasn't to be. Arnold put up a great fight, but came in second by a single stroke to the late Kel Nagle from Australia. He must have been bitterly disappointed. But as you would expect of the man, he accepted it with the greatest dignity. Undeterred, Arnold returned to the championship the following year and won in simply atrocious weather at Royal Birkdale. He often said his second round was the very best of his career, and that was a 73. He retained the claret jug in 62 at Troon, with the finest golf many said they had ever seen, taming the fearsome 11th hole in each round with long iron play of simply astonishing quality. Now, amazingly, in those days, every competitor in the Open had to play in the qualifying rounds to secure his place in the championship proper, and that even applied to the defending champion. Arnold clearly didn't think too much of this and explained to the R&A in no uncertain terms that this practice had better be changed, or they might face something of a shortage of past champion entries in the future. Now, not always quick on the uptake or renowned for its speedy responses, the R&A immediately introduced an exemption system for the following year in 1963. They knew the way the wind was blowing. The R&A and the Open owe Arnold a very great debt. In those difficult post-war years prior to 1960, very few American golfers played in the championship. And in those 15 Opens, there were only 2 American winners. Arnold's success in the early 60s inspired many more of his countrymen to make the trip to golf's oldest major. And in the following 15 Opens, American players won on 9 occasions. The Open had been revitalized and was firmly back on the road to the great event it is today. Despite his disappointment in 1960, Arnold loved St Andrews and always enjoyed his visits to the home of golf. He became an honorary member of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club in 1979, and I particularly remember one of his fairly recent visits about 7 years ago when he played in the Spring Medal. The weather was simply awful. 45-mile-an-hour wind, very cold, horizontal rain, and Arnold's group decided to call it a day after 6 holes. When Arnold got back to the clubhouse, he was literally blue with cold, and I suggested that we might repair to the trophy room, where we introduced Arnold to the miraculous inner warming and restorative properties of whiskey mac. For those of you not familiar with this cocktail, it's a very strong mixture of Scotch and ginger wine. Arnold clearly took quite a liking to whiskey mac, as after several further iterations, the group got around to discussing the possibility of increasing the drink's popularity by renaming it after the great man. At this point, Alistair Johnston, Arnold's long-term business manager, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, rather spoilt the party by reminding us all that the name Arnold Palmer was already spoken for in the beverage sector. Arnold simply raised his eyes toward the ceiling. Gladly, Arnold made further visits to St Andrews, and in 2010, he was awarded the honorary degree of Doctor of Laws by St Andrews University. Most recently, though, he attended the Champions Dinner last year at the 2015 Open and played in the 4-hole Past Champions Challenge. It was a great occasion, a beautiful summer's evening, huge crowds lining the 1st, 2nd, 17th and 18th fairways of the old course. We had 28 champions competing in teams of 4, and needless to say, Arnold received the loudest and the most rapturous reception. A measure, I think, of how his popularity had not waned one bit, but had actually grown as the years had passed. And you can guess whose unfailing commitment to our sport, through his strong support of golf's return to the Olympic Games. He understood just how positive this would be for the smaller golfing nations, and he felt a duty to speak out to help grow the game that had given him so much. Yes, Arnold was golf's greatest ambassador, both at home and abroad. He mixed with heads of state, with presidents, with prime ministers, but he never lost his common touch. He could open doors which were firmly closed to others and spread interest in golf far and wide. But we all know he was more than an ambassador. He was the king, and always will be. Have there been better golfers? Well, perhaps, but only a very few. Has anyone done more for our game? No one has come even close. Has there been a finer human being? Well, I admit I haven't met one yet. Arnold, we wish you Godspeed and thank you from golfers the world over for all you have done. Yours was indeed a life well played.
Okay. Doesn't fit. Doesn't. Oh well. There have been a few times in my life where standing behind a podium just felt a little different. A bit more meaningful, more memorable, and because of that, perhaps more difficult in both my head and my heart. One of those moments came 4 years ago last month when I was honored and humbled to be asked to speak on behalf of Arnold Palmer as he received the Congressional Gold Medal. It was a day to celebrate everything Arnold has meant to golf in our country. The other opportunity is today, an occasion when I'm again honored and humbled to help you celebrate everything Arnold has meant to golf in our country, but also to our hearts, and most difficult for me to celebrate what he has meant to my life. In many ways, the easiest and most difficult speeches are when you're talking about something that means so much to you. Arnold Palmer meant the world to you, the game of golf, his countless fans, and my wife Barbara and me. Because of this is not one of the easiest speeches, so you don't mind if I read a little bit here. And if you forgive me, I would like to borrow a little from September 2012, when I stood before Congress to thank him for honoring my rival and my friend, Arnold Palmer. Before I do, I must mention one thing about that day. As you might expect, there was a parade of politicians who spoke with whereas this and whereas that. Some beautiful, wonderful things were said about Arnold, but I noticed the entire time that Arnold was rather stoic and showed little emotion. So I started to wonder about something. Most of you all know that Arnold is a bit of hard of hearing. So after the ceremony, I got to the elevator with Arnold and I said, "Tell me something, AP. How much of that ceremony did you hear?" Zero. So I started laughing and said, "Well, you might want to get a video because some really nice things were said about you." When I spoke that day, I kidded that when you get to be our age, you meet a lot of people who begin conversations with, "I remember when." It's not uncommon for a new friend to walk up and say, "I remember when I saw you at the 1962 U.S. Open at Oakmont. I was standing behind the 17th green and was wearing a yellow shirt. You waved and winked at me, remember?" Of course, there's only one response to that. How could I ever forget? As I said then, and I repeat with a heavy heart today, in parts of 7 decades I knew Arnold Palmer. There were countless and sometimes comical "I remember whens," and most important, even more cherished moments I will never forget. There will remain the moments that provide us a glimpse into the golfer who epitomized charisma, the man whose character, loyalties, and loves were unshakable, the caring, giving gentleman we celebrate today. He was an everyday man, everyone's hero. Arnold managed to remove the I from icon and instead let the world share in his greatness. Over the last week or so, I have shared so many stories with people about my dear friend Arnold Palmer. At least to me, these stories that illustrate that Arnold Palmer is the Arnold Palmer I will never forget, and I hope never forget. Hope you never forget. He was hitting these short irons, but he was drilling them about 8 feet high, and they looked like they just running right through the rain. And I sat there and looked at it, and I watched him for about 30 minutes. And I didn't know him, he didn't know me. I walked into the clubhouse, and I said, who in the world is that guy on the practice tee out there hitting balls like Popeye? He said, oh, that's our defending champion, Arnold Palmer. Well, that's an Arnold Palmer I will never forget. I remember when 4 years later, at the age of 18, I played up with Arnold for the first time. It was Dow Finsterwald Day. Dow had won the PGA Championship to celebrate his victory. They held a 4-man exhibition in Athens Country Club in southeastern Ohio. And we had a driving contest on the first tee. First hole was 330 yards long, obviously a par 4. Arnold drove the ball on the green. I drove the ball over the green and won the driving contest. I shot 68 that day. But of course, Arnold went out and made 8 birdies and an eagle and shot a course record 62. For years, I pointed out to Arnold that I had outdrove him, and he quickly reminded me he shot the lowest score. So if you ever wanted to know the genesis of our friendly rivalry, it was when I was 18 years old. The date, September 25th, 1958. And the competitiveness between us never ended, be it ironic, fitting, or something spiritual to me, that very day exactly 58 years ago. But with passion that came with Arnold's game and our competition, I quickly saw the compassion that would always underlie it. I remember when we played our first PGA Tour event together. It was early 1962. I was a 22-year-old rookie, and we were playing the final round of the Phoenix Open. Arnold and I obviously were paired together. We got around to the 17th green, and Arnold came over and as we walked off the 17th, he put his arm on my shoulder. I knew, and he knew, that I needed a birdie to finish second. By the way, Arnold only nipped me there by 12 shots that week. Arnold said, just relax. It's not a hard par 5. You're in good shape. Just play smart, and you'll finish second. He didn't have to do that. It was Arnold Palmer. Yet here was Arnold trying to help a young guy while winning the tournament. That's an Arnold Palmer I'll never forget. I remember when I won my first professional tournament and my first major 54 years ago this summer, 1962 at Oakmont. I was a 22-year-old with blinders on, having no clue that I was not only battling the great Arnold Palmer, but doing so in his Pennsylvania backyard at Oakmont. Yet I remember we were about to tee off an 18-hole playoff. Arnold walked over to me, and in those days, it was customary for when we played a playoff on the extra day that you split or the winner won the gate for the last day on the playoff. And Arnold walked over to me and he said, "You know, would you like to split the gate today?" And I said, "Well, you know," I said, I sort of felt like, well, you know, why would he want to do that? I mean, he's going to win it anyway. And it turned out it was $1,400. That was the gate. But I said to him, I said, "No, let's just play for it. I guess I want it." It seemed to me like a king's ransom then. Anyway, here I was, a winless rookie with a 9-month-old baby, about to play the most important playoff of my life, and Arnold Palmer was thinking to me, by the way, it turned out to be a kind offer, and eventually, because I said I eventually pocketed the whole gate. But still, that's an Arnold Palmer I'll never forget. Mark McCormick managed Arnold and me, as well as our dear friend Gary Player. And because of that, we were put together in matches and Big 3 exhibitions all over the world. We played together, we traveled together, we laughed a lot. Our wives became the absolute closest of friends, as did we. I've said a lot this week about Arnold. Had two loves, golf and flying. And of course, Russ did a beautiful job capturing Arnold's passion for planes and flying. In some ways, Arnold approached his golf much like flying. He was passionate, loved to go fast, and he had a fearlessness about him. I remember a day in the 1960s, Arnold and I went out to Seagraves, Texas, a little town in West Texas, to play an exhibition. He had picked me up in his Aero Commander, and it was one of those windswept days in West Texas. And the Aero Commander, we were just bouncing all over the sky. To me, I felt like a piece of paper in a tornado, and I'm holding on for dear life, scared to death. In fact, it's like a roller coaster coming off the tracks. I looked over at Arnold, and he was laughing. And it was like he was sitting in the front seat of a roller coaster, enjoying every moment. I did not enjoy that flight. And with his other love, golf, before muscles taught piercing raindrops with every shot, Arnold Palmer was the everyday man's hero. He embodied the hardworking strength of America, with his shirt often hanging out, a hitch in his pants, and Arnold played a game we could all appreciate. He made the recovery shot a form of art, and people adored it. At times, he played like no one else before or after him, and at times he played like everyone else who had ever gripped a club. And that endeared him to all, watching outside the ropes or from their living room. He appealed to everyone. When he slipped on a green jacket, you might say he was comfortable wearing a blue collar or white collar beneath it. He had a swagger long before it was cool, but his charisma came with a softness, a smile, and a wink. And as everybody has said today, a trademark thumbs up. We competed in everything from majors to endorsements to golf course design to a game of bridge at 40,000 feet. You name it. We likely competed for it, and I promise you, if there was ever a problem, I knew Arnold had my back, and he knew I had his. I've said before, and I can't emphasize it enough today, I may have had to battle Arnold's army early on, but I never had to battle Arnold Palmer. Today, I'm a proud soldier in Arnie's army. You see, I've even got an umbrella on my lapel. He was the king of our sport, and he always will be. Like the great Vin Scully, when he called his last game Sunday night for the Dodgers, he says, "Don't be sad that it's over. Smile because it happened." Today, I hurt just like you hurt. You don't lose a friend of almost 60 years and not feel an enormous loss. But my wife often says the memories are the cushions of life. Each of you sitting here today, or perhaps sitting at home, has at least one wonderful memory of Arnold Palmer to balance out your hurting heart. So today and many years from now, I simply ask you to just remember when. To his dear wife, Kit, his adored daughters, Peg and Amy, their families, Kit's children, his friends, and his millions of fans. Remember when Arnold Palmer touched your life, touched your heart. And please, don't forget why. Thank you.
Wow. And I thought I was nervous at the Colonial. If the greatest can read, then may I follow suit. When Amy called me last week and asked for a big favor, Never in my wildest dreams did I think she would ask me to speak today. This is not a favor, Amy. This is my greatest honor. My sincerest condolences to you and the entire Palmer family. Arnold Palmer, the common man, but so far from common, touched so many lives, big or small, young or old, ladies or lads. As we so elegantly heard earlier, whether it was on the links around the world, in the sky at 30,000 feet, through the lens of a camera, as a rival and a friend on the tee, or as a father and a grandfather of a loving family, he embraced us with his charisma and poise. The connections are so different, but the feelings and the sentiments are all the same. Arnold made everybody feel special. He was friendly, he cared, and he had the sparkle in his eye that is unforgettable. Everybody loved Arnold. Growing up in Sweden, I first saw him from afar through TV and magazines. However, as his army grew, golf became more popular, and he changed the way it was viewed, covered, and played. I was one of his army of fans. But growing up, it never crossed my mind that I would meet him, interact with him, have dinner together, and most fondly and proudly call him my friend. Arnold gave hugs, warm hugs, time. Our paths crossed for the first time about over 20 years ago. I was just a young, aspiring golfer, but that didn't matter to Arnold. He supported the new generations and was happy to be a mentor and share his experiences. We did a few commercials together and some corporate outings. He would send letters to congratulate me on my career and offer his help if I needed it. His support meant a lot to me. Although it was golf that introduced us, it was his work off the golf course that would bring us even closer together. When I moved to Orlando and my playing career was coming to an end, I was excited to give back to the game in my community. I often looked up to Arnold and his post-golfing career to get inspired. As a woman and future mother, I was especially impressed with his philanthropic efforts benefiting women, children, and babies. We talked about collaborating to teach fitness and health to the younger generation, and we visited his hospitals on numerous occasions. He loved kids, and he was a proud spokesperson for March of Dimes. Thanks to that role, he recognized the need for a one-of-a-kind NICU facility. Through his foundation, he assembled a team of experts, invested in high-end technology, and recruited the most experienced doctors and nurses. The Winnie Palmer Hospital for Women and Babies came to be one of the top hospitals for families in the world. Little did I know at that time we would be one of the families soon relying on the hospital's knowledge and expertise. Our first child, Ava, was born at Winnie. 17 months later, I was pregnant with our second child. And on March 20th, 2011, my husband, Mike, rushed me to the hospital. I was having some complications. We were both terrified, like any couple would be. It was a nightmare. We arrived at the emergency room in the middle of the night and were admitted. As stressful as this situation was, I vividly remember feeling very calm and safe in their presence. We were in the hands of true professionals, incredibly caring individuals, Drs. Alexander and McMahon. They took us under their wings. 16 hours later, at 27 weeks, our son, William Nicholas McGee, was born. He barely weighed 2 pounds, and he was about 8 inches long. We named him Will because he needed the willpower to survive. He was rushed to the NICU and put in an incubator for immediate care. And ironically, this all took place during the Arnold Palmer Invitational at Bay Hill, which annually raises money for this particular hospital. For the next 57 days, our second home was the Winnie Palmer Hospital. We would take turns visiting Will every day. We will never forget our experience there. We had never been in a situation like this before. As a golfer, I was used to feeling in control, crunching numbers, and thinking this was the most important thing ever. But not so more. Now I was crunching different numbers, like his weight, his heartbeats. This moment in our lives helped us put things in perspective. During our hospital stay, the Winnie Palmer team checked in with us regularly to make sure we were okay. This was appreciated, but certainly not expected. This was a regular routine for the staff, and it wasn't because I was a golfer or a friend of Arnold's. This came naturally. Arnold would come and visit us, and during one of his visits, he gave Will a personalized flag from the Arnold Palmer Invitational, and he invited him to play in his tournament at Bay Hill one day. 12 months later, the week of the 2012 tournament, we were invited up to Bay Hill, and we proudly reintroduced Will and Arnold. Arnold took Will on his lap, lovingly, and they bonded. Arnold smiled and joked as Will grabbed his cardigan, as any healthy and curious toddler would do. That was a very emotional time that we will always cherish. There's no doubt in my mind that without this wonderful hospital, his staff, and of course, Arnold's vision, our little man, Will, would have made it. Every day, they made us feel important and special. When we cried, they comforted us. When we were scared, they gave us courage. When we were tired, they energized us. They are leaders in the industry, and they gave us a peace of mind. These are acts of love, sincerity, and commitment. And in today's world, that can be rare. But again, it's reminding us how special Arnold was and how he impacted people and their lives in such deep, meaningful ways. Our most recent interaction was in Minnesota at a golf course that we redesigning together called the King and the Queen. He once again held Will, who referred him to as Uncle Palmer. I'm not sure if Will mistook Arnold for Uncle, but maybe like so many of us, Arnold felt like family to him too. At the end of our journey, we can only be judged by the amount of lives we have touched. Arnold inspired millions with his kindness and generosity, and we are reminded of that through our fortunes with Will. Arnold, even though you are the king, you made everyone feel like royalty in your presence. Your legacy will continue to march on, and now it's time for us to carry on what you have started. But knowing you...
Ladies and gentlemen, can you believe the power and strength and love of this ceremony? I think it's absolutely incredible. I've been asked to say just a couple of brief words about two of Arnold's legacies that I know were so important to him. The first is the Arnold Palmer Cup. The Arnold Palmer Cup is a Ryder Cup style event, matches the top collegiate players in the U.S. against their counterparts from Europe. In 2018, it was AP's vision to expand the event to include both men and women. And golfers chosen all around the world will benefit from this. Secondly is Arnie's Army. You know, I couldn't help but think that historically, when an army loses its commander, it becomes an even stronger force because it wants to prove to its beloved commander its respect for him and its love for everything he's accomplished. I think that will happen with Arnie's Army. The commander may not be in the presence physically, but he's there and he will drive everything that the Army does. The three primary beneficiaries, by the way, of the Army are the Arnold Palmer Medical Center in Orlando, the Winnie Palmer Nature Reserve right here in Latrobe, and the Arnold Palmer Cup. So these are two of the legacies that I know meant so much to him and in which he reached out so much, personally and otherwise, to make sure they continued. I just have a couple of closing comments. First of all, for those who organized this program, my deepest thanks. You've done a brilliant job. For all the speakers, every one of you was superb. You brought your love and your feelings to all of us. I couldn't help but laugh when there have been a couple of comments about Arnold's hearing. When they were in the desert in the winter, he and I would have coffee every morning about 6:30 a.m. I would go to Starbucks and get some and bring it over to the casita. And I'd go in, and Arnold would be sitting at the head of his table with the undershirts that only he wore. Brooks Brothers does not feature, folks, these undershirts.